Following in the footsteps of Owlcat's previous games, Pathfinder, Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader is an immensely vast and deep ocean of cRPG goodness. And this ocean is filled with all sorts of interesting characters to chat with, locations to strip bare of anything that looks even remotely valuable, a plethora of insane cultists to squash in turn-based combat, and, as is tradition, a dazzling array of bugs that would make even Papa Nurgle proud. Greetings and welcome friends, I'm Ash, and if you're curious about what exactly Rogue Trader does well as where it strays a bit too close to heresy, allow me to share with you my thoughts after spending a frankly unhealthy amount of time playing it over the past week. Rogue Trader is a classic cRPG, and the game is not ashamed of this fact whatsoever. From the very first screen, you'll be presented with hundreds of different stats, perks, and abilities which you can mix and match in order to create exactly the kind of character you want to be. You can grab a two-handed chainsword and run at the enemy while screaming like a lunatic. You can be a terrifying psyker raining death from afar while risking your very soul with each spell. Or you can even completely give up on weaponry and just focus on supporting and directing your underlings from the backline. This level of customization is one of Rogue Trader's greatest strengths, and also one of its potentially greatest flaws. While you can indeed create some highly imaginative, varied, and powerful builds, doing so requires a firm knowledge of RPG systems, and way more math than most people are going to be comfortable with. Usually, this sort of thing would be obfuscated and reserved only for turbo nerds like me that care about squeezing every little advantage we can get out of a single character. But in Rogue Trader, pretty much everything besides the most basic of attacks is littered with formulas, special modifiers, and unique conditions. Once you embrace the madness and really dig your teeth into the game, it'll all start to make sense. But until then, you're going to be checking and rechecking your abilities over and over again in order to figure out what Rogue Trader even expects of you. Climbing that mountain is well worth it, however, as there are some really funky builds to explore. Just as an example, the Grand Strategist specialization allows you to transform certain areas of the battlefield into unique zones that offer different types of buffs and debuffs for characters standing in them. You can then further enhance these zones with a variety of abilities, thus heavily incentivizing you to plan out your strategy from beginning to end in order to make the best use out of these zones. As such, a singular Grand Strategist can massively impact how you approach any particular battle, and they're not the only ones. Even the most basic of builds, which would be the shooty shoot man that likes to shoot mans, has a lot of depth to it since almost all of their abilities and perks can interact with each other to create some genuinely devastating combinations. The end result is a turn-based combat system that looks very standard on the surface level, yet contains a great deal of complexity for those willing to get their hands dirty. On the most basic level, the combat is all about positioning. You want to get your characters into cover, flush the enemies out of cover, and then focus fire on the important targets one by one until you are victorious. If you don't want to, it really doesn't have to get any more complicated than that. On the other hand, once you realize how some abilities and effects can interact with each other, you'll be able to pump up characters to monstrous levels of power and just carve through enemies like they're made out of butter. My favorite little trick here is orchestrating things so Argenta, the Sister of Battle companion, can empty her entire bolter magazine into a demon's face before her turn even begins. And just in case all of that simply isn't enough for you, Rogue Trader also has a space combat mode where you, and likely an escort, get to battle against other small fleets. The big thing here is that your turn rate is very limited and that you can never stop moving, so the space battles are more of a puzzle game than anything else. It is a fairly small part of the game, so I won't dedicate any more time to it, but what I will say is that it is a far superior mode than Wrath of the Righteous Crusade minigame, and honestly, quite enjoyable in its own right. That said, while I do genuinely enjoy the combat and the interplay between the various abilities, there is one recurring problem that kept bugging me all throughout my playthrough: the wonky pacing. Just about every encounter will have you face off against dozen enemies, and in some of them you will have upwards of 50. For the most part, this is perfectly fine, as watching your characters explode a whole gaggle of goons in one move is deeply satisfying. But there does come a point where simply blasting through hordes of enemies stops being fun and instead just kinda becomes tedious. If you already know the enemies pose no threat to you and then you've won the battle before it even started, going through the motions of wiping all 30 of them from the map feels more like a chore than anything else. This goes doubly so when you're traveling across the star map, as you're frequently going to get assaulted by random enemies, none of which ever pose a threat, yet all of which demand a sizable investment in resources or time in order to dispatch. This was an issue in both Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous, so honestly, I'm very disappointed to see it repeated in Rogue Trader as well. Now mind you, it is not a deal breaker by any stretch, especially since the actual combat is so satisfying. But it does feel like you're occasionally being forced to stop eating a delicious cake in order to fill up on plain bread. A distraction that Rogue Trader really doesn't need. Unlike some of the RPG elements I've mentioned thus far, the actual story in Rogue Trader is fairly easy to comprehend. You are a newly crowned rogue trader, an unbelievably powerful and influential individual with a carte blanche to do basically anything you want, as long as it is in the service of the Imperium. If this means you have to commandeer an entire planet or strike deals with outlawed alien races, then so be it. You have a giant piece of paper signed by a literal god saying you can, so I mean, who's gonna stop you? Naturally, you don't just get to sit back, drink fine wine, and enjoy the good life, as a full-blown heretic uprising has thrown your little corner of a space into complete disarray. So with cultists everywhere, warp travel limited, and madmen raving about some sort of apocalypse about to happen, you'll need to personally take charge of the situation, explore the stars in search of potential clues and allies, establish and develop new colonies, and hopefully sort everything out by the end. Or, if you're so inclined, just make everything so much worse for everyone. Much like its predecessors, the writing in Rogue Trader is generally great across the board. So much so that I've been missing out on sleep for the past few days, as I just couldn't stop myself from diving into one more quest. Just one more. Just one more. Regardless of where you go, from the bastions of humanity to the most backwater of worlds, there's just about always someone to have a lengthy conversation with. Not all of these are important or have any sort of connection to the overarching story, but what they do offer is a closer look at the Warhammer 40k universe and some of the finer details that often get lost when focusing on great battles with thousands of space marines running around. As you wander across the stars yourself, you'll also pick up an entourage of, well, eccentric characters that will serve as your advisors, bodyguards, confidants, and perhaps even as romantic interests. If you've played any of Owlcat's previous games, it should come as little surprise to hear that every single one of them is fascinating. In fact, my biggest quibble here is the simple fact that I couldn't bring all of them with me whenever I went to undertake a mission. The main reason I found them so endearing is that they act exactly how you would expect their archetype to act, yet without pushing things to the point of absurdity. The Sister of Battle is ultra-religious and highly aggressive towards heretics, yet she tempers all of that rage with her desire to help others. The Inquisitor similarly wants to destroy everything and everyone that even smells slightly funny, but he's also willing to let things slide if it is for the betterment of mankind, and so forth. These small, and I really do mean small, touches of humanity give them a lot of personality and make them feel like actual characters, rather than the simple caricatures I've come to expect from most Warhammer 40k games. The downside to all of this, if you wish to see it as such, is the Rogue Trader has a lot of text for you to go through. And when I say a lot, I really do mean it. It's a lot. Some of it is voice acted, mostly when it comes to character-specific quests and the main storyline, but the vast majority of it is just good old text on a screen. Personally, I don't really mind this sort of thing as long as the dialogue isn't just waffling around for no reason. And thankfully, Rogue Trader does a good job of keeping things focused. On the technical side of things, I'm happy to report that Rogue Trader is quite stable. I've encountered no crashes, no major glitches, and my performance has been excellent all the way through. However, this doesn't mean the Rogue Trader is free of technical problems. On the contrary, it is so riddled with bugs that I don't think I've managed to do a single quest without encountering at least one, though thankfully they're all mostly small annoyances. These include characters tap dancing while attempting to move during combat, cinematics not playing properly, tooltips being completely wrong, enemy actions taking ages to complete, sounds persisting through scenes, sounds not playing at all, the camera getting stuck on random bits of scenery, and the list goes on and on and on. Much like Nurglings, individually these bugs are no problem whatsoever, but when they accrue in sufficient numbers, they can really wreak havoc on someone's mind. When you're just sitting there, staring at one cultist after another, fiddling with their grenade for 30 seconds before actually throwing it, all the while your screen is completely locked onto them, you very quickly realize just why some people might want to join chaos and raise the entire universe. That said, it is important to reiterate that these are not game-breaking issues. While they did frustrate me at times, none of them ever impeded my progress or forced me to reload a save from an hour ago like I had to do in Wrath of the Righteous. So while I do hope many of these issues will get fixed in the near future, Rogue Trader is thankfully playable even with them around. As long as you don't mind your characters breaking into a dance battle every once in a while. The final thing worth talking about is the presentation. First and foremost, it is important to note that while Rogue Trader is generally easy on the eyes, it is by no means on the same level of graphical fidelity as some of the AAA games out there. This is most noticeable with the animations, as some of them can be quite stiff or even outright missing. Personally, I don't really care, as I am quite happy to trade a bit of graphical fidelity for a massive and fleshed out world to explore. As for the actual visuals and atmosphere, they do a great job of portraying the Warhammer 40k universe in its entirety, and not just the propaganda version of it. What I mean by this is that you will not only run across absurdly large cathedrals and magnificent factories, but also a lot of downtrodden slums, long-abandoned cities, ships that are nearly falling apart, and other such examples of the extreme inequality that is rife throughout the Imperium. Since this is an RPG, Rogue Trader has also included a variety of different ways for you to approach the Warhammer 40k world and its many dilemmas. You can go with the standard dogmatic outlook and just shoot everything that looks even slightly funny at you. Take a more nuanced look at things and attempt to make drastic changes for the betterment of all, even if everyone resists them, or just go full-blown Chaos Worshipper mode and chew on baby bones for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Whatever option you decide to go with, it is blazingly obvious that Rogue Trader gets exactly what makes the Warhammer 40k universe tick. Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader is a cRPG player's dream. It is absurdly vast and intricate, offers a great degree of customization and role-playing opportunities, and best of all, it is a very faithful adaptation of the equally vast and intricate Warhammer 40k universe. While it does have some notable problems, mostly the same ones you might be familiar with from Kingmaker or Wrath of the Righteous, Rogue Trader is a ton of fun, and likely a game I'll be replaying quite a few times over the years. So if you're a fan of old school RPGs, or the Warhammer 40k universe in general, I would heartily recommend checking Rogue Trader out. It really is great. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you would like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, pet your Inquisitor, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you again for watching, and I do hope to see you soon. Bye bye!